Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. Today, something happened that hasn't happened in a while. There was a Rules Committee meeting, and there was a gut and replacement amendment offered. And I think I saw the amendment in print around 1 o'clock. So 7 hours ago, we had a major change in the legislation that was before us. If you remember the original legislation when it left this House, it dealt with some problem gambling issues. And of course, we know as members that the Senate added some provisions with regard to internet gaming. Now, when the Senate handled the internet gaming, they established a two-tier or two-rate number. 1% equal to what our existing casinos pay for slot-type activities, and 1 for poker. And so at least when the Senate send us the bill, whether you're for internet gaming or not, I am not. I believe it's socially irresponsible, but nonetheless, when they sent it over, at least it followed and had the industries matched in rates. In rules, for some reason, we decided to cut the rate that the state would receive and the taxpayers would receive for internet gaming. Now, there are many people around the Commonwealth that believe that internet gaming will cause a loss of revenue to casinos. There are some casinos that say it will not. To the extent that that argument is correct, today we're being asked to exchange 54% for a lower rate, whether that be 15 for certain internet activities or 34, whatever it is, for VGTs. Of real concern to me is this idea that we're going to institute video gaming terminals. Now, my committee had a hearing on that issue, but there was not extensive opportunity to hear from the Gaming Control Board and from the police department about what the cost and procedures should be to ensure that this would be done properly. And in case the members are wondering what the bill says in that regard, I would have you turn to section 3303 on page 196. And reading from that section, you will find that this bill proposes temporary regulations and temporary licenses. We have no idea what the Gaming Control Board considers to be the real cost of law enforcement and properly checking these applications. What we do know is this bill would force them to do everything, put out an application within 60 days, and complete the review within 120 days. The applicant will receive a temporary license which can be taken back from them in a year. If I were investing money in a business, I don't think I would be happy with a temporary license. But as the committee that is responsible for rolling out legislation that we can have confidence in, I do not have that today. If you read the provisions, it even has under C, special consideration. When promulgating temporary regulations regarding the application, background, investigation, and renewal of an establishment license or regulations regarding the licensee's duties and responsibilities regarding the conduct of video gaming under this part, the board shall consider promulgating regulations that minimize the regulatory burden on establishment licensees and establishment license applicants. And then it goes on. So what we're saying in this legislation is, Gaming Control Board, please use the loosest scrutiny you can so we can have our money and we can have it now. That is completely irresponsible. Even if you think that language is appropriate, Don't you think you would like to hear from the Gaming Control Board and from the state police as to what resources they will need in order to implement these rules that we're presenting to them? We do not have that information, and I can tell you that the regulatory costs that are established in here, which have now been capped, will be inadequate in the minds of the state police to do what they need to do to undertake this new responsibility. Of equal concern to me, and it should be to you, is the lack of an opt-in provision. What does that mean? In Illinois, when they adopted this type of gaming, they did so because they could not get the votes for a bridge and road replacement fund, and they needed bonding. And so what they did was they came up with this type of revenue, video gaming. It grew in the rural areas, but in the areas where there were casinos, the Gaming Control Board issued a report and said all we did was shift chairs on the boat. They lost money and they lost activity in the area of Chicago and their other big cities, and they gained activity in the rural areas. But in the end, the growth of the total tax was very stagnant. Keep in mind, Illinois' tax rate is much less than ours. But one thing they did do, they absolutely insisted on that we are not, is a local opt-in. The gentleman just spoke very eloquently from Philadelphia about his concerns for his communities. Out in the lobby, there's a map, and the dots overlap so much of the potential VGT sites, I don't see any area that's not covered. In my community, we have a bunch of places that my wife and I and family like to go to dinner. You have them too. New Hope, Newtown, Doylestown. I've talked to every one of those three municipalities, and I'm thinking about all the great places we have in Pennsylvania where you go and you can enjoy. If you pass this bill the way it's written, you, not them, will have forced your communities to have video gaming terminals in every licensee in your community. When I spoke to the mayor of New Hope on Friday, he said, "Are you kidding me? You're going to do that without my ability to say no? How could you do that to me?" And I said, "Mayor, I will not do that to you, but I cannot guarantee that the rest of the House will not force that on you." Don't do it. When your constituents find out that the laundromat turned into a suds and gambling place, when every place they go, they see video gaming terminals, they will rightfully blame you, and your local officials will be glad to help them blame you. Listen, we've only had this bill for 6 hours, and there are already reporters calling members about some of the interesting groups that are receiving monies out of this bill that none of us knew about until we read it, that have nothing to do with gaming, absolutely nothing. An arts center, we're going to build a Y, we're going to pay for a pool. Look, there is another alternative. There's an alternative in my committee. That alternative is so much better. It needs more work, but it is so much better than what we have. That alternative would produce $360 million annually in projected reoccurring tax revenue, create 3,000 new jobs, $600 million in new investment, 4,000 construction jobs, 26 new local shares, a 54% tax rate, not this 30-something, 15%, $700 million in indirect economic benefit, $240 million in upfront cost, and not this complicated, convoluted regulatory scheme that we have no idea whether it will be effective or will be done. The only thing we know is once we make it law, the Gaming Control Board will be stuck with it, and we will be left with a surprising bill. Based upon all the things I've said, Mr. Speaker, I would move that this bill be recommitted to the House Gaming Oversight Committee for purposes of a hearing, specifically with the Gaming Control Board and with the state police on the actual cost of implementing this bill.